Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Low Season Traveller Insider Guides. I'm your host, Jed Brown, founder of Low Season Traveller, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Chalana Perera, who is the founder of Retrace Hospitality in Sri Lanka. Now, Chalana has been a friend of Low Season Traveller for quite some time, and when you hear from him, we think you'll see why. Chalana is on a mission to help hospitality businesses progress with purpose. He partners with investors, developers, and operators to regenerate long-term value by repositioning real estate and hospitality assets. He founded his own organisation, Retrace Hospitality, with a conviction to prioritise responsible business practices, embracing regeneration as a catalyst for change in hospitality development. He's dedicated to the promotion of Sri Lanka as a truly sustainable destination, and we are so proud to call him a friend of Low Season Traveller. So without further ado, let's hear from the man himself as we welcome Chalana to the podcast to tell us all about the wonderful low seasons in his home in the Indian Ocean. Enjoy. So Chalana, you are most welcome to the Low Season Traveller Insider Guides podcast. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Jed. Thank you for having me. It's really exciting to connect from lands far away through this medium and to share a little bit about our precious island, Sri Lanka, at a time where we're just resuming our tourism industry that it looks forward to welcoming travelers from all over the world for some really meaningful and wholesome experiences that we have to offer here. So thank you for having me.
It's absolutely our pleasure. And it is wonderful timing as well, because we're recording this on the 28th of September, the day after World Tourism Day, of course. And Sri Lanka is starting to open up now. It's been a rough couple of years for Sri Lanka, right?
Correct, Jed. I think the complexities of what this island has had to go through for decades, or even if you want to look into the centuries, it's always been the center of complex issues, right? Without going too deep. But I think that's also what creates a very exciting destination, ironically, right? There's been tragedy, there's been incidents, there's been chaos from the pre-Civil War, pre-independence times of colonization, and there have been, dozens of kingdoms in ancient Sri Lanka. There was always chaos. But what's left of those has created, ancient ruins and civilizations which you can now visit. And of course, in more modern times, tourism has been affected by civil war, the tsunami, terrorist attacks, and most recently the pandemic. But through it all, the island has remained resilient, remains open and eager to welcome curious or intrepid, discerning travelers. And now more than ever, I think post-COVID, and the big reason why I moved to the island, actually relocated here from Europe, is because this is the place to be post-pandemic, or if you really want to focus on nature-based experiences, health and wellness, having fresh air, starry skies, and pristine rivers and waterfalls to jump in and cool off. Sri Lanka is the place to go for that. So it's a really exciting time for the industry, despite the hardships that we've all been through in the past 2 years.
100%. So look, I guess, so for our listeners out there, I'm quite familiar with the island of Sri Lanka. I need to see an awful lot more. But I got married out in Sri Lanka in 2004, the year of the tsunami. I also went back after to help with the relief effort after the tsunami. So I've got a little bit of familiarity with the island. But for listeners who maybe they know of Sri Lanka, but they don't really know what Sri Lanka is about, tell us a little bit. Give us a little bit of an overview of the teardrop of the Indian Ocean, as we call it.
Nice. Yeah. So that's always funny. It's how to introduce this island, because you have the media, especially the travel media, that has all these exotic or marketing terms that fit quite well. And indeed, the island is shaped like a teardrop. There's also the pearl or gem of Asia. I like to call it the Emerald Isle, simply because it's lush, and it is that deep emerald green when not only when you're flying over it, but when you're walking the streets or out in the countryside. It's a very lush tropical paradise, and I think paradise is probably the most apt word for the island. But to summarize, Sri Lanka can be quite complex. Please do cut me off if I go on and on in long lines.
No. That's what we want. That's what we want.
If I go on in long descriptions, but I think it starts with a combination of understanding the geography and the history, and it would take multiple lifetimes for me to ever understand it myself. I'm only scratching the surface with the depth that Sri Lanka has in terms of history and ancient civilizations for thousands of years, and historians and philosophers or professors from the world over, analyze Sri Lanka's history and have varying viewpoints. But the island is, if you want to take it today, literally smack dab halfway between London and Sydney, right? And on the other end of the spectrum, it's also halfway between East Africa and Beijing. And closer by, it's almost perfectly halfway between Dubai and Singapore. So you can imagine, where we are, and going up from here, we've got India and the whole subcontinent region, which is culturally and historically also so diverse. But interestingly, south from Sri Lanka, due straight down from our southernmost tip, there's no single piece of land until Antarctica.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because we are at the busiest trade or shipping routes in the world historically and still today that pass by our southern waters. So it's just a fascinating location. And being an island, of course, air connectivity is today what brings travelers and tourists in. And then historically, that fascinating location has made this island home to, I like to call them visitors and guests, but many of them were uninvited invaders and occupiers. But that has, of course, brought a lot of our rich cultural heritage and the beauty of what remains from that. We've got a very diverse population. Modern history has also been quite complex. We're a non-allied country. That's also why we welcome tourists and visitors literally from everywhere. And if I can say, that's also been the challenge of Sri Lanka's tourism industry or tourism sector, to put it in a nutshell, is our positioning, frankly speaking, has been so difficult to streamline, right? Other than saying tropical island, which obviously has a connotation of, coconut palms and beaches. There's so much of depth and so much of diversity and variety in this 65,000 square kilometers of island that is not just beaches and palm fringed coastline and not just ancient Buddhist temples, but there's so much. So and in that, it's how it's a positioning that's diverse in terms of the product offered, types of the types of experiences, and all this has evolved over the past decades. So yeah, as an overview, you've got quite a compact island that has a fantastic infrastructure, a road network, rail network, really crazy public bus network, efficient way to get around, tuk-tuks as well. And what all those different modes of transport, or even cycles or private cars, can lead you to are, there are 26 national parks on the island. I recently learned that we have 6,000 Buddhist monasteries.
Wow.
Over 24,000 Buddhist temples, which collectively own 30,000 hectares of primary forest lands or regenerated forest lands. So you're talking about pristine natural habitation that's outside of the national parks that are intertwined with these ancient forest monasteries and ancient civilizations. So the depth, again, I emphasize, is that it's very, very rich in that heritage. And over the years, as various visitors and foreign arrivals came in the form of colonization or trading, in better terms, plantations developed, different agro and allied industries developed. There's a hub for spices, a hub for gems, a hub for certain minerals, and of course, the larger scale plantations commonly known for tea, coconut, rubber. So all of those have created this very dynamic fabric on the island, and with modernization, you've got all kinds of products and you've got all kinds of experiences, right? We've got an extensive coastline which provides access to fantastic water sports, but we've also got inland water bodies, thousands of lakes, and also a recent fact that I learned being here is that we have the highest density of waterfalls in the world. So
Wow,
300,
did not know that.
Yeah, so 382 waterfalls in a space that is, I think, 1/4 the size of the UK. And
Wow.
that's waterfalls that range from, almost 300 meters high to 10 meters across various lush landscapes within the interior of the island. Um, so that provides for a lot of different experiences. There's also the North and East and more modern history, which were inaccessible due to civil strife.
Yeah.
And those areas are so different in the topography, right? Desert lands, very harsh and barren, which have phenomenal experiences for sort of more rough outdoors, and beaches that are untapped, corals that are really unexplored. We've got desert islands off the north coast between here and India and the Pak Straits, which are inhabited. There's wild donkeys running around, but tourists typically don't go there, but they're more than welcome. It's perfectly safe. Um, and then you've got, kingdoms which are now modern cities, like up in the hills, the Kingdom of Kandy, which is such a diverse offering, and the famous cultural pageant called the Perera, part of the temple, which holds the sacred relic of Lord Buddha's tooth. So the legend has it.
Yeah.
And we've also got, a place called Sripada, which in English is referred to as Adam's Peak. And it's a mountaintop in the middle of the South Central jungle highlands, which all four major world religions have legends saying that it was the foot of Adam, the foot of Lord Buddha, the Prophet Muhammad, and Hindu deities that have all marked their steps on that, and that makes for an attractive and quite a well-established destination within the island, where tourists love to climb up in the middle of the dark hours of night to see a spectacular sunrise from the top there. I'm only scratching the surface with some of the key highlights in summarizing that there's so much in the cuisine of the culture that's also very rich and actually, really exciting. So
I wanted to get onto that, onto the cuisine, because some people might sort of presume incorrectly, I guess, that it's just the same as the different Indian cuisines, but it's quite unique, isn't it? Tell us a little bit about some of the dishes and the cuisine that you have there.
So Jed, since being back the past couple of months, and again, I'm born Sri Lankan, a Sri Lankan national, but know this country somewhat as a tourist, as a local tourist, let's say, because I used to fly back here for holidays while living in Europe and other countries. And every time I just discover new vegetables, right?
Really?
That I don't even know the names for in English, but they're just prepared in these ways where it doesn't feel like you're eating a vegetable, right? So in terms of the cuisine, it's also very region specific. There's different preparation methods. It's known colloquially as being hot and fiery and spicy, and that is true. There's a lot of flavor, there's a lot of rich compact flavor, and they can be spicy, but there's a lot of what we call superfoods globally, which are just inherent to the local cuisine and have been around forever. So high fiber, highly nutritious in their content, which are locally sourced vegetables prepared with a mix of coconut, relishes, fresh mustard seeds, freshly ground peppers. And a lot of the food and the salads that we have are we eat the leaves of the passion fruit, which people don't realize, or the leaves of beetroot, and the leaves of a lot of different crops, which otherwise typically are wasted in other food cultures.
Yeah.
And those are prepared in raw salads or stews or in different ways. There's a lot of what's colloquially known as curries, which are actually quite complex in which they're prepared. There are some curries that take a couple of hours to prepare. They're so slow cooked. One of my favorites is jackfruit, which you prepare it as a really rich curry, and you can almost feel like you're eating a pork curry, right? Pork meat curry, and that's also slow cooked for a couple of hours with coconut milk and really cooked down slow on low fire, so it's tender, and it's a process. And the typical Sri Lankan household, Jed, even in the city, even with modern or more advanced communities in urban areas, they have two kitchens, right? They've got a little kitchen space inside, which is more modern with a stovetop, etc. And they've got some form of outdoor kitchen or outhouse kind of kitchen where they have the more flavorful items cooked over firewood or other types of, and you cut your fish and you cut your meat outside. So in terms of hygiene, it's brilliant. In terms of smell, there's no issues. And if you think of cooking Sri Lankan food in an apartment in London, all your neighbors are going to walk over. But here, it's just a part of the fabric that people spend time cooking, working with really hyper local ingredients. That's cultural. And then it happens to be also very trendy with Western travelers, right? So
Yes.
vegan, organic. There's a whole lot. There's a whole lot of fruit varieties that just make for a really exciting and a diverse palette. And it's not all about spice, and it's not all about curry. There's a lot. There's really a lot.
I must say, one of my favorite things to eat when I first went to Sri Lanka, there was a load of guys from actually it was with Sri Lankan Airlines. I was a guest. And they said, "Jed, you've got to try a hopper." I was like, "What a hopper? Describe for us what a hopper is for our listeners, because you'll be able to describe it better."
Brilliant. Yeah, a hopper is so it is prepared typically using rice flour and coconut milks. There's a batter made, and for Europeans listening to this, can be compared to a crepe or a galette batter, and in a to a lesser extent a pancake batter, but more light actually. And it's poured into this deep sort of mini wok. The batter is poured into this mini wok, which is usually on a nice open fire, and you imagine pouring this batter into this mini wok, and you sort of turn it, so you create this. And it's perfect you asked me this, because I made my own hopper the day before yesterday for the first time in my life. Very difficult, not as easy as it looks. And you have to pour this thing. You put a little bit of oil to grease your pan, and it has to be the perfect temperature. So the little wok has to be perfectly heated. Put it on the fire. You close it with a lid, and you wait a couple of minutes. Now, this is also, it comes with experience.
Oh, I've lost you. Oh, lost you.
Can you hear
me? Yep, you're back. It comes with experience. Go on.
So you turn the little wok so that the hopper batter's equally heated from all sides while it's on the open fire. Have the lid closed 3 to 5 minutes or so, and then it's ready. You open it out and you sort of take it off this wok with a utensil, like a metal utensil, you kind of scrape it off more elegantly than that. Yeah. And it turns out into this crispy, crepe like pancake, which goes so well with coconut sambal, or curries, or onion relish, which is a sweet onion sambal as well, slow cooked. And you can have it with an egg. And now there's even concoctions with spinach and vegetable flavors. So perfect for breakfast, lunch, or dinner.
There you go. I used to have it for breakfast. I used to have an egg hopper for breakfast with all the different sort of sambals and everything else. Oh my God, just flavor sensation. I've sort of said this before a few times when I've been speaking to people. And I say the same whenever I go to India as well. I feel like my taste buds wake up when I go to certain countries, and Sri Lanka is definitely one. I think it's like you were saying before, it's the fresh ingredients, whether it's the spices, but I feel like my taste buds have been dormant the whole time I'm here in the UK with our rather bland food a lot of the time, although we do eat a lot of curries, but they kind of wake up when you go somewhere where you have this incredible fresh ingredients. But yeah, I do love my hoppers actually. So next time I go back, I'll be trying those. Tell us a little bit about the kind of wildlife that you have in Sri Lanka, and the reason that I ask this is, Sri Lanka is definitely, I think, people know that there are elephants in Sri Lanka, and there's elephant orphanages, and there's all kinds of great places there, but also you have in Sri Lanka what I can only describe as flying dogs. You'll probably know what I mean, or suspect that you know what I mean. When I was first in Sri Lanka, we saw these things, and they looked, for all I could tell, these were massive in the air, flying, and it looked like they were dogs with wings, colossal wings. And I'd never seen anything like it. And of course, they are the endemic bats that you have there, which I'd never seen. In the UK, bats are something which is like this size, and it flutters around really quickly. Bats in Sri Lanka, and I'm sure you do have all kinds of different ones, but there are ones which are just colossal, and I couldn't take my eyes off them.
Yeah, you've got, especially in the area where you were on the southwest coast, I think, where you got married there. You see them hanging in the evening, and actually there's also fruit bats, which are very common, and hanging around the trees and making a big noise. And it's quite a beautiful sight at sunset, but of course a bit disturbing because bats do have that reputation, right?
They
But
do.
we've got a lot. We've got a lot on this island, and without quoting statistics, there's a high density of endemic species, or high variety or presence of endemic species, some of which are threatened, which makes, of course, responsible tourism and tourism, or conscious tourism management, really an integral part of Sri Lanka's offering and Sri Lanka as a destination. So again, 26 national parks, but also thousands of acres of forest reserves dotted around, and a lot of that is threatened with development and so on, which I think, going off the beaten path is certainly the best way to discover Sri Lanka, especially going forward, and that will show you that why there is so much diversity. We've got a rainforest called the Singharaja National Park, which is a large swath of a primary rainforest remnant, and this is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of eight in the country, one of two which are national parks, the other being Horton Plains National Park in the Central Highlands. Stunning landscapes, extremely diverse and different to the more commercially known national parks, Yala and Wilpattu, where you've got the leopard attractions, and we've got the largest land mammal in the world, the elephant. And you can have a look at an elephant, or see plenty of them on the roadsides early morning while driving to the coast before getting on a boat to go out into the waters to see blue whales, the largest sea mammal. So we've got the two, largest land and water creatures to roam the earth currently, within close distance. Of course, when I talk about wildlife tourism and the experiences for wildlife in Sri Lanka, I am an advocate of really responsible and conscious visitation of these parks, and that comes naturally. And I think it's nice that you notice the bats, because it's not often that people make that remark, and it's very true. We are known for being a bird watching paradise. Again, going back to what I mentioned at the beginning about our geographic location, migrating birds flock to this island throughout the year. I'm not an expert on the seasons and which species, but there is a huge diversity of birds, and many of them endemic, but also many of them migratory. So there's a huge bird watching audience that come to different parts of the island, lakes as close as the suburbs of Colombo, where there are some large lakes, bodies of water, mini biosphere reserves, and then on the east coast near Kumana and Yala National Park, huge bird watching, but also in the Central Highlands and in the North Central Province, where there's plains and a mix of mountains, paddy, and larger national parks. So our ancient kings created these irrigation systems and dams and water tanks, which just were so complementary to the existing biodiversity and wildlife. We've got sloth bears, we've got different kinds of Asian elephants. Actually, there's a couple of very rare fellows up in the rainforest hills, and then there's ones in the plains. So we've got also the slender loris, which is extremely rare. We've got black leopards. There's a more scientific name for that as well. Again, hard to spot, but for wildlife enthusiasts and researchers and scientists, they do come here, and they do come to look at the flora and fauna, of which there's so much depth, and so many ancient trees, massive trees, really tall, hundreds of years old. So if you're into the real natural world, this is an island for you. And there's so much in terms of wildlife beyond the typical safaris and beyond the typical boat tours. Huge mangrove reserves, and more effort going into mangrove conservation in an area that I'm very passionate about personally, because of the importance of those for our ecosystems. And you notice that travelers come in with an appetite to learn about the mangroves, and to learn about these ecosystems. So there's again plenty of that, and plenty of ways to experience it, going on hiking off the beaten path. Always recommended with guides, but there's several mountain ranges in this country where you wake up in the morning, you go for a stroll, there's not much signage, nobody's going to bother you, and it's just pristine nature, and you'll hear so many kinds of birds, and very, very relaxing. I mean, digital detoxing is best done here with the nature and with the diverse flora and fauna, which varies from different parts of the island.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. And we've spoken quite a bit before, Chalana, about about ecotourism and about responsible tourism and about sustainable tourism. And you've sort of told me in the past that that's very much the route, I should say, that Sri Lanka is taking. A lot of people, when they think about destinations that are big on responsible tourism and ecotourism, they tend to think more towards the Latin America, the likes of Costa Rica as an example, but that's very much sort of front and center now with Sri Lanka because of all of the reasons that you've said. This richness of wildlife, this natural environment, as well as a cultural, historical kind of background as well. That's very much the route that Sri Lanka is taking. Really, it's very much taking a mindful, responsible, an environmental approach to tourism as well, right?
Correct, Jed. And again, that's the challenge. That's been the challenge in our positioning, because there's so much to offer and so much to explore in a compact island. How do you brand yourself as a destination? And I think, and partially what I advocate for as well, is the concepts of ecotourism or responsible and sustainable tourism should actually be ingrained in the entire experience, no matter what you're coming for, from where and for how long, and what kind of holiday you're having, or even if it's for business travel, right? Those are almost like saying, oh yeah, by the way, we have free Wi-Fi, right? So being responsible, conscious, and eco in practice is almost a standard and a norm across a large segment of this industry. And then of course you have specialist operators and providers that have tented camps or brand themselves as eco and do a lot of ecologically conscious or environmental based experiences for their guests, and their properties are built and designed in a very regenerative manner, and that's for sure. And there's plenty of stellar examples around the island of that. But in general, as a destination, the experience is moving towards being more responsible, and that really comes simply from one source, and that is the inherent nature that we have as a Buddhist island, right? That heritage and that culture is a big part of the Sri Lankan way of life, which I think travelers going forward will realize, and that many have and should aspire to. I mean, that's something I aspired to in leaving Europe and coming here, is that you can have that healthy balance. So it's not, I don't need to stay in a tree house, but I can stay at various types of accommodation, and I know the produce on the menu is hyper locally sourced, if not produced on site. I know that the staff working are from the local community or from the vicinity, and goes beyond the waiter being a son of a local family, because the mother could be preparing hand-woven baskets for which the fruit are presented in. The father could be preparing the curd fresh from the farms. So you've got this fully integrated experience that is very responsible. And a lot of operators and investors and developers are working on that angle going forward. And that's what I'm really excited about for the future of Sri Lankan tourism. That's the space I'm involved in as well. And there's so much value and so much of a wholesome experience in that, being transported also by more, let's say, carbon neutral methods. And knowing that there's a lot of dependency on nature to make things work in this island, right? It's not about being susceptible to climate change, because I think the climate's always been changing, and that's something that's a natural process, and it's changing rapidly, and we are affected, of course. But it's recognizing that actually that's an opportunity, right? That's an opportunity if there's flooding and waste management and pollution and all of that did increase, and I love the conversations that you bring to the table all the time, and you bring to the mainstream travel media about over tourism. I think it's brilliant what you're doing, and thank you. And that is the inherent opportunity we have, because it's prioritizing that balance between development as a destination, without just saying, okay, we're going to have ecotourism because that's what people want. They look for ecotourism and stuff, but no, it's actually, we are just very responsible in our entire product offering. The way that's built and so on. And it's making sure that the sites are well taken care of, that the environment is well taken care of. Otherwise, we won't have a destination going forward, right? So for sure, it's a long-winded answer to your question, but it's a very essential component to our heritage.
It's a very important one. One thing we also need to talk about as well, for people who aren't necessarily familiar with the ins and outs of Sri Lanka. And for me, there are so many attractions to Sri Lanka. I mean, it is an incredibly rich island in terms of culture, in terms of heritage, in terms of history, in terms of nature, 100%. In terms of the just the general beauty of the island. But one of the most significant attractions, I believe, of Sri Lanka, and one of the reasons I kept coming back, is the Sri Lankan people. The Sri Lankan people, in my experience, are just the most wonderfully friendly, warm, welcoming, generous, and kind people that I've come across as a tourist or a traveler on my travels. Tell us a little bit about the Sri Lankan people and about I suppose the psyche of the Sri Lankan people, what they're about.
Ooh, very
It's not
complex.
easy. I know it's not an easy one to answer.
But it's
As I was asking that question, Chalana, I was thinking, wow, if somebody asked me the same question with regards to the Brits or the Irish, that would be a struggle.
I think we could do a whole separate podcast series on that. But I think it's a super important question, right? I think it makes you reflect on, what does an island that's been constantly visited and traveled and traded with international communities, the world over for centuries, what does it become in terms of identity? And I think it's the same words I used before: complex and diverse and very rich in that sense. The psyche is also resilient, curious. There's a lot of interesting stories that people have to share. You talk to three Sri Lankans on one day in your travels here, and you'll have three very different perspectives. And it's not about their ethnic background or what language they speak. It's much deeper than that. It's where what do they do? What do they feel is their purpose, and how do they interact with their environment, whatever that is, wherever they may be, and whatever their livelihood is. And I think that's one of the most exciting aspects of a trip to Sri Lanka. You talk to a fisherman who you used to might have been fishing, in a very sustainable way, line fishing, and now might be doing, a kite surfing business, right? Because we overnight became one of the top destinations globally for kite surfing. Or you look at yoga, holistic well-being and healing. You've got ancient practitioners who sort of inherit the rights to practice indigenous medicine or Ayurvedic practices or Ayurvedic Kama. We've got all different terminology for these well-being, which are local indigenous medicines and rituals for healing, natural healing. And they get passed down through generations. So it's really fascinating to hear the stories. I was recently staying at a boutique property on the South Coast, and one of the managers was telling me how she's inherited her right to be an official indigenous medicine practitioner. And it was just a phenomenal perspective and how she's evolving with the time. So I think, the psyche of the Sri Lankans are so complex, and that's what makes the destination again exciting, because we're evolving. It's a destination that's constantly evolving, but at the same time, I'm sure you would experience it, elements of it are stuck in time, and sometimes it might seem lost and confused. And I think that's the beauty of it. Every time I travel to different parts of the island regularly, I'm always impressed. I always learn something, and it can be something very simple, and you watch how somebody makes tea at this roadside shop, and how they prepare tea in another place, or how they prepare a hopper, or there's so many complexities and intricacies in that, and that reflects in the cuisine, that reflects in the type of experiences, and it makes for a really fun destination. The guys that taught me how to go whitewater rafting or surfing are Sri Lankans who, when they were growing up, never saw somebody whitewater raft or never surfed. So tourism has brought some really interesting experiences, but then I'll also go on nature trails and hiking or into the rainforest, and I'll have a naturalist who's a guide who has 3 degrees from local universities and will tell you the world about bird species and plants and the history of primary rainforests. And I'm like, wow, so it's fantastic. It's really exciting.
I love it. It's just even as you're talking and you're reminding me there, Sri Lanka is a wonderful destination for surfing as well, which, we sort of haven't touched on. And, do you know what I think is kind of interesting is, we always talk about different islands, and in, I suppose, traditional tourism, you spend most of the time talking about the beaches. And I was just thinking to myself, any listeners out there who aren't familiar with Sri Lanka, we haven't even touched on the beaches. But anyway, what they all need to know is Sri Lanka has just got the most gorgeous beaches. and all that comes with that. There's projects along the coast there that are working on preserving and helping the turtle populations and all of that. So there is that whole side which we haven't touched on. But before we let you go, Chalana, just wanted to talk through obviously the low seasons. There are two low seasons, we understand, in Sri Lanka. You've got, basically, broadly speaking, the east side and the west side. The west side, sort of the low season, traditionally tends to be when there's more rainfall, which is around kind of May, June, July time. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's typically, and again, with climate change, this is what we notice. It's all changing, and it's all changing fast. So the consistency is less, but typically the southwest coast, which is the bulk of where traditional tourism takes place, which is the most lush but also most densely populated part of the island, has its high season or most attractive weather from right about now, actually mid-October, let's say, in 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now is when the season picks up. December, January being really the peak. February, March, and then April is when the low season kicks off in the more commercially established tourist cycles and tourist destinations. So from April till end of August, save for school holidays, there is a typical low. Of course, with Easter and the August holidays, things pick up again, but the months of May, June, July are considered rainy or really hot. And Jed, again, that's again why I really praise you for Low Season Traveler. It's just a misconception, because this is a tropical island. So what we do have 365 days of the year is very comfortable weather. You're not going to be freezing ever, and you're not going to be, boiling. You can be in shorts and t-shirts, and up in the hills, you can get very cozy with the fireplace throughout the year.
Yeah.
And as a tropical island, and I compare it often with Thailand, Indonesia, Bali, Myanmar, a lot of tropical destinations, you're going to have days where it's hot and it's sunny and shiny, and just about when you wish it would cool off, it rains. And I think you had that, right, in Sripada. And that's the beauty of it. I'm always comfortable here. And you don't even need air conditioning, frankly speaking. You have a cold shower in a river or the sea in the morning, and you survive the day in very comfortable climates. So there is this misconception of a low season, which is changing now, thanks to COVID, I think. And the operators typically package things based on the northwestern hemispheres, so Europe and North American calendars, right? For that winter or the Russian winter, people come down to get away from the cold, and that makes sense. But it's equally beautiful, lush, and tropical in May, June, July, and August. Actually, that's a fantastic time. August is when there is the Perahara, the Kandyan cultural pageant, which is just stunning. Really, we were talking with some friends here locally, saying, where is there a festival or celebration or ceremony, let's say a religious ceremony like this, at this level of intricacy and detail in the world? We were thinking of the carnival in Rio, which is very rich and lush, and you've got all kinds of things all over the world. But this is deep rooted in heritage, but it's in the off season, so to say, colloquially, in August, right? So likewise, the largest Buddhist holidays are in April and May. The Sri Lankan New Year is in the middle of April, which is typically the shoulder season leading into the typical off season. So there's a lot of cultural, local events of traditional significance that happen outside Europe and North American winter months. But if that's not enough, then it's again going back to all those adventure sports. You can surf on the East Coast when it's not raining on the West Coast, when it's not raining there, and if it's on the West Coast, you drive a couple hours. So you can always find rain or shine depending on what you feel like within easy reach. And if it rains hard, it's beautiful. It's just stunning. I mean, it's more lush than when it's not raining, right? And you hear different birds that come out after the rains. The sky can be all kinds of funky colors. So for photographers and for people who, don't just want a tan, it's fantastic throughout the year. And for people who want a really nice holiday with tropical weather, it's fantastic throughout the year.
Yeah, exactly that. That was certainly my experience, Chalana, and I think I've spoken to you about this before, but we were there in the June, which is the lowest of the low in southwestern Sri Lanka, because I think traditionally it's because it's the rainy, it's the rainiest time, or it's the time when on the charts it says it's got the highest rainfall. And we kind of went expecting, that it was just going to be nothing but rain all day. And of course, it's not. Those high rainfall figures, they come from, downpours, which are like no rain I've ever seen in my life, frankly. It's beautiful. There's a beauty to it. And because it's unlike any rain that you see here, it's a heavy, serious downpour. But there's an absolute beauty to it. And there's also a beauty to the fact that, it's kind of warm. And, you're watching this, this rain all around you. And then when the rain stops, because inevitably it does after a couple of hours, this freshness and this cool atmosphere, which is just lovely, but everything feels like it's fresh, like it's just been born. And it's like a big reawakening almost. It's just absolutely wonderful. And that was our experience. Most days, actually, it was dry and sunny. But like you said, in the afternoon or sort of late afternoon, early evening, when, frankly, you really needed a downpour, that's when it came. And it was just out of this world. And I think that, that's what we want to try and get across at Low Season Traveller, is rather than just look at the weather charts, understand what the experience is to be had, because far from detracting from the experience, it provides you with a new experience that maybe a lot of people haven't experienced before, and that's kind of unique and special, I think.
Exactly. And something we didn't hit on, because there's so much again to cover, and it's a whole other conversation, is the type of accommodation that there is, right? And regardless of rain or shine or seasonality, typically the Southwest coast and the beach properties, which are some of the oldest, the resorts or the boutique villas, are marketed, quite differently based on seasons, because of either the surf season or the seas being considered rough. But when you're staying along the coast, Jed, it's important to remember that, there's only so far you can go into the sea, right? It's more about going inland. Even if you're the best surfer or swimmer in the world, you're not going to go hundreds of kilometers out into the water. But going inland, you can. And you can still stay on the coast and go in. And that's what a lot of people are recognizing. And there's a lot of development in product inland, while you can still stay on the coast or experience surfing. And, there are all kinds of hotels or accommodation providers. And, I recently discovered something completely off the beaten path in the middle of jungles, in the middle of these two seasons as well, in a tiny village called Hambe Gamua. It's a place called Banyan Camp, and it was created completely out of recycled and repurposed materials. Wow. And the owner, is an independent entrepreneur who built this over years. I mean, really over many years, with repurposed wine bottles and glasses and waste by the shores of a lake that is untouched. And there's elephants that go through the property at night, and you have a completely renewable energy generated power sources. All the food is locally sourced, and this is a part of Sri Lanka that no tour guide, no tour group would ever know or would ever promote. And there's no signage to get there. But the reality is that's just one of many hidden gems throughout this island, and they've been there for years. And again, the point is there's no seasons to stay in a place like that, and the experiences are infinite. There's hundreds of temples in the forest around. Again, no signage, no guidebook, but you can discover it. It's something I want to stress is this is a very safe island, right? You can go around as a solo traveler, even as solo female travelers. I know several who've come here, and they take the obvious precautions as they would in London on a Friday night, right? And that's what's really exciting, is that this island accommodates that. English is widely spoken, and when it's not, the language of smiles works really well. So the low season is when all that it can be experienced also, or the typical low season at its best, because a lot of these hidden gems are so they're really remarkable. It's really the best way to describe an authentic experience is when you come when it's not being marketed to you, and when you're staying in these little gem of accommodations that are not on the commercial media, and then you have a phenomenal travel experience.
Absolutely. Listen, it's just been fascinating. It's so hard, Chalana, as you're talking, I'm thinking, it's so hard to basically sum up an entire country, especially one as rich in in possibilities of Sri Lanka to sum it up in one short podcast, and yet that's what we've tried to do. But I think what we've tried to do is give people who maybe aren't familiar with Sri Lanka a little bit of a sample and an understanding of what this island offers. And it's like with our articles on Low Season Traveller, we don't hope to cover off everything about Sri Lanka or everything about any destination that we feature. But what we do want to do is pique people's curiosity. Let them know that, look, destinations like Sri Lanka are utterly wonderful in the low seasons. Don't be put off by it at all. But please do, everybody out there, find out more about Sri Lanka as well for yourselves. There is so much information on the web about any destination in the world, and Sri Lanka is no different. We will, of course, have a focus on the low season elements of Sri Lanka on lowseasontraveller.com. But you can find out an awful lot more information out there. But I think, Chalana, what we'll do is we'll leave it there for now. I think we should do another episode, maybe in a few weeks' time, maybe just before Christmas, where we talk about the different types of accommodation that you can experience while you're in Sri Lanka. Because I know, obviously, it ranges from, 5-star luxury hotels to tented camps to everything in between. And I think that would be a really cool podcast to highlight maybe some of your favorite places that there are for people to stay in Sri Lanka. Maybe that would be a cool episode next time, eh?
For sure, with pleasure, Jed. And thank you for taking the time and giving the opportunity to showcase this little island amongst all the beautiful places in the world. So Very exciting. Thank you.
Oh, we love it. Thanks a million for your time, Chalana. And until next time, have a wonderful week.
Thank you, Jed.
So there you have it. Huge thanks again to Chalana for taking the time to share his insights on beautiful Sri Lanka with us today. And as we mentioned in the podcast, we will include links to all of the places Chalana mentions in the show notes on lowseasontraveller.com. Next week, we head over to the Swiss Alps, where I catch up with our good friends at Switzerland Tourism, right on the back of my recent visit to this wonderful low-season destination. Please don't miss out on this one. It's a cracker. But that's our show for this week. Thanks as always for your company. Have a great week wherever you are. Stay healthy, stay safe, keep your travel dreams alive, and don't forget to share this podcast with your friends, family, and social networks. And finally, please remember that travel is always better, fairer for the planet, the local communities, and you, the travellers, when it's without the crowds.